I think career counseling is a really good idea. A well-experienced career counselor can interview you and figure out what your interests are. That's really big. So many people I know who've changed careers have done so because they had a passion and they finally woke up one day and said, I don't like getting up in the morning for this job. I'm going to make the change.
Welcome, everyone, to the Road Less Traveled Show. This is a show about people that were successful in a previous career and left that career to go down a different path. I'm your host, Richard Coyne. On today's show, we're so pleased to have Joel Friedland with us. Joel, welcome.
Hey, nice to see you, Richard.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining the Road Less Traveled Show. We're so pleased to have you. So, Joel, if you would, kind of go a little bit into your background, kind of what did you used to do and, kind of talk about your previous career for a bit, please.
So I started out as an industrial real estate broker. 22 years old, graduated from the University of Michigan, and I was hired by a family that I met, a father, two sons and a daughter. Their last name was Podolsky, and they owned 84 industrial buildings, and they had a brokerage company, industrial brokerage. So industrial brokerage is just like being a residential broker, except instead of selling and leasing homes, they were selling and leasing industrial buildings, manufacturing facilities, big buildings like 20,000 feet, 50,000 feet, 300,000 square feet. And there was a lot of leasing and a lot of selling. And I fell into it. I met these people, and Steve Podolsky, the oldest son, put his arm around me and said, I'm going to teach you. And the father put his arm around me and said, I'm going to teach you also.
Nice.
So I wasn't a member of the family, but I became a leasing agent for their properties and then a general broker representing outside third-party sellers, landlords, tenants, and buyers. It was a great business. I was 22 years old in 1981. The market was horrible because there was a recession on. Interest rates were 17%. And so I was doing a lot of leasing because there weren't a lot of sales going on. In my first year, I did 36 leases. Wow. And I made $14,000, which wasn't enough to move out of my parents' house.
That's
and then the next year,
a lot of work for $14,000.
It's a lot of work. Really small deals, like 2,000 and 3,000 square foot leases with very small companies that were relocating. Some of them, by the way, have turned into giant multi-billion-dollar companies since then. Wow. And they're still my clients to some degree and friends. So in the second year, I was incredibly lucky and I made a six-figure income.
Wow. And
in my third year, I made an even bigger six-figure income. And by the time I was 25 years old, and you got to remember this was 40 years ago, I was making $350,000. It was an incredible job.
Wow.
Yeah, I was really, really lucky. I fell into a system. It was not just me figuring it out. They brought me in, and there are 300 industrial brokers in Chicago. And today, most of them make mid six figures, and many of them make seven figures take home. It's an amazing business.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of manufacturing, a lot of warehousing in the Chicagoland area. Yeah. It's huge for manufacturing and whatnot. So nice.
Yeah. Well, it was great. It was great.
Yeah. Gotcha. So, what path are you on now? You're still doing the brokerage?
Well, that's why I thought it would be a nice discussion with us, because I was doing well, and then I leveled out. I wasn't doing any better. I couldn't figure out how to do better. And I suppose maybe if I was smarter, I could have figured it out, but I didn't. So for a number of years, I had up and down years because brokerage is a feast or famine business, and I could still make six figures, but not necessarily as much as I did in my fourth year and fifth year. Because sometimes from year to year, there's just a dry spell. Maybe you work on a deal one year and it gets done the following year, because it can take a year or two to broker a completed lease or a completed sale with all the negotiations with the lawyers and everybody else.
Sure.
So yeah, it was great. But then I looked at the dad, Milt Podolsky, and I thought about it. I said, he's got 80 buildings And he's got this home in Florida, which is where I am, by the way, right now. That's why all that sunshine is coming in the background. I'm at a Verbo house on Longboat Key.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah. And I said, I want to be like Milt. I want to be in Florida when I get to be in my 60s or 50s or maybe even sooner. And I don't think I can do it. I'm tapped out as a broker. I can only make so much.
Right.
And I was just trying to figure out, how do I become an owner like Milt? And he showed me the inside workings of being a syndicator. He actually, I didn't get it for the first few years. I was just so focused on being an agent.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand what he was doing. And in the background, what he was doing is assembling groups of partners and developing or buying industrial buildings. And then he started doing office buildings.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he did a $200 million office complex while I was still brokering for him. And I still didn't get it. It didn't get through to me that I should be doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
So I went to Milt and I said, I want to be a syndicator. I want to be an owner. And he said, I'll help you do it. I'll put up a third of the money if you go find a deal.
Wow.
And I found my first syndication, and I was 30 years old. I'd been in the business for about 8 or 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a building and I raised money from other people, $20,000 per person. And I had to put in 20,000. And I don't know if you agree with this, but there's an old saying, brokers die broke.
Mm-hmm.
Owners die rich.
Yep. Yep.
So,
yeah, I mean, what you discovered, like you said, it took you a little while to kind of for it to trigger, for it to fall in your head or make sense in your head that this is what I need to do. Okay, fine, I can make a commission on selling, but here's where the real money is. And just as I know, many people in real estate, whether it be single family, whether it be the residential, whether it be commercial, whether it be the multifamily, there are a lot of people that do the brokering that just don't invest themselves. And it always, I'm on the investing side. I'm not a licensed agent. I don't need my license because I have, others, ways that we do deals, and we syndicate deals as well ourselves. And I'm not going to go get a broker's license. But again, it is amazing how many people are in the real estate space that just don't invest themselves, don't figure out how to crack that code to become an owner and obviously build their wealth. And you did. So well done. Nice. So now you're driving and you've done more than that first deal you mentioned, I imagine. So, yeah.
Yeah. So now I've done 100 deals. I've bought 100
Wow.
buildings and all over the country. And I bring in investors. Our minimum investment's 25,000, but most of our investors could do $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
It's our deals are too small. I can't let them do that big of an investment with us. We don't do a fund.
Okay.
We just deal by deal. So if we're raising, let's say, $2 million and I've got 50 investors, I've got the problem of I would run out of room if I let somebody put in. 4 people could put in $500,000 each, and my other dozens of investors would be pushed out of the investment opportunity.
Right.
But what I wanted to tell you is that the brokerage was marvelous, except when it wasn't. There were years when my income was half as much as it was the year before. And then there were years where my income was a quarter of as much as it was before. And then there were years where it was double or triple what it was the year before.
Mm-hmm.
It's very uneven.
Yeah.
And the syndication that I did when I was 30 set me back because I stopped doing as much brokerage, and I had a horrible brokerage year. That year and the following year, and even the year after that, I was gearing up to do syndications and buy properties. But I have to tell you, the brokerage is a hoot.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much fun to meet all different kinds of people who own companies that do crazy things. And I had so many unbelievably funny experiences as a broker. I'd have to tell you.
Can you share one? Can you share a funny story?
Yeah. So the year that I started syndicating, which was 1989, I was doing both. I was a broker, and I was also learning the syndication from Milt and Steve Podolsky. And I had a good friend who was an investor in my deal, and he was a brokerage client. They had a company that made children's socks, underwear, pajamas,
Hmm.
and they were a very large company in Chicago. They had hundreds of employees, and they were on a street called Kimball Avenue. They had 100,000 square feet, and they grew, and they needed 25,000 feet more for
Okay.
storage off-site.
Hmm.
So I knew somebody else that had 25,000 square feet in the back of their building that they weren't using, I called and I said, would you lease out your back 25,000 square feet in your 80,000 foot building? The guy's name was Alan Harris. He said, yeah, sure. I said, I'm bringing someone over if you don't mind this afternoon.
Hmm.
So I brought this group. It was Leonard, the CEO, and two women, one who was a CFO and one who was some kind of warehouse manager.
Okay.
And I took him on a tour of the building, and I took him to the 25,000 square feet in the back. And these buildings sometimes used to have boiler rooms. The old buildings had boiler rooms with this giant heavy metal door. And so I said, you want to look in the boiler room? And I slid the door open. And on the floor, on the concrete floor, on a towel, is a couple, a man and a woman, totally naked in the 69 position, going at it. And so I backed up like this, and one of the women screamed. She went, ah! And the other woman goes, oh. And Leonard went, ooh. so, so
And
I said, oh, excuse us. So I slid the heavy steel door back closed, and I looked at them and I said, interesting company they have here. Because it was an empty space. So apparently two people that were employees decided to get together and take a time out and enjoy
wow.
themselves.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I went and I finished the tour, and I said, I went to Alan Harris's office. I said, Alan, two of your employees were having 69 sex on the floor on a towel in your boiler room. He said, oh, let's go figure out who they are. And he wanted to go himself to see what was going on. So I brought him back there. And of course they were gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my funniest brokerage experience.
Wow. Yeah, that definitely is a one to remember. So,
Yeah.
so Joel, as again, once you crack the code in your head, you realize that through the family that you're working with, that they were willing to help back you, and you were starting to make this shift into syndicating your own deals. What were some other obstacles you had to overcome?
Well, first of all, I had 1991 happen. This was when the Gulf War took place, and there
Hmm.
were other issues in the economy.
Hmm.
And one thing that was horrible was I was trying to do a $2.7 million deal. It was a development, and I only raised 2 million of the 2.7. We were doing an all cash deal with no mortgage.
Hmm.
And the buildings were vacant because they were being developed from scratch. A 20,000 and a 30,000 square foot building in a town called Aurora, which is west of Chicago. And I needed to borrow $700,000. I had planned to borrow something eventually,
Yeah.
but I thought it would be easy. Until then, just like a couple of years ago, it was easy to borrow money. And I went to my bank, and I said, it was called American National Bank. And I said, I'd like to borrow 700,000 to finish this development. They said, our real estate department is closed. Don't you know the economy's in a glitch right now and things are bad? From
Hmm.
on high, the C-suite people at our giant bank have said no more real estate lending.
Yeah.
I said, I'm borrowing 700,000 against a $2.7 million deal. They said, if you were borrowing $1 against a $2.7 million deal, we would not do it. It's not a matter of your deal being bad. It's a matter of our bank deciding not to do real estate for the time being.
Wow.
And so I fell into a panic and didn't know what to do because I couldn't leave the building without windows and sidewalks and a paved parking lot and all the other things that weren't finished at the end. And I went scrambling, and I finally found one banker who said, of course I'll loan you 700,000 on a $2.7 million deal. But for the longest time, I was so worried. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you get in trouble when there's no debt on a $2 million deal where you only need 700,000 more?
Yeah.
It was disastrous. And my wife can tell you, we went through this together as, I mean, I fell into a funk. It's like I thought I was going to lose everybody's money and have a reputation in town that I did this stupid thing and couldn't finish a deal.
Yeah. But you were able to secure the loan, and the deal was able to go forward, right?
I found a banker that was an owner himself of a very small bank, and he was a friend of a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Went in to see him, and I said, I need 700,000 on a $2 million equity deal, so it'll be 2.7 million total. And he yelled, Sally! And a woman comes in. He says, put 700,000 in an account and have Joel sign up. I said,
Nice.
what? I said, done. It's who you know.
Nice. Yeah, it is. It really is. I mean, again, you talk about, real estate is an unfair advantaged market because of relationships. We do multifamily apartments, and we found a particular property, and a lot of times we'll do 100 units and up, but the market's changed, so we're having to make lemonade with our lemons, right? How do we look at something else that might be a possible deal? So we found a deal. We thought it was a great opportunity. I don't remember what was already built. Just call it 60 units were built. But the great part about it was that there was another couple of acres in the back that were already approved for another 50.
Mm.
So we were going to develop it as part of this overall transaction. We were obviously looking to figure out how you do the loan separation and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, well, we came in second. The reason we came in second is because that seller had sold to their buyer another deal.
Yeah.
So they already had an existing relationship. They already had, purchase and sale agreement documents already negotiated. So yeah, of course they're going to win. They had a prior relationship.
Yeah.
And so it happens. And, again, when you're in the position where you're able to leverage that to your advantage, it's all gravy, but obviously you kind of got to get there. And you mentioned that you've done, now 100 deals. That's incredible. Wow. Very nice.
Yeah. I've got so many funny stories that I could tell you that have to do with the 100 deals. Every deal has its crazy thing that happens.
Yeah.
It's just,
yeah.
Recently, about a month ago, closed on a $13 million deal where there are 3 buildings on the Chicago River, 1,200 feet of river frontage.
Mm-hmm.
And we bought it from a family that just didn't want to be in business together anymore. A mother and 2 daughters and a son.
Mm-hmm.
And they make fruit juice concentrate. It's called Tampico.
Yeah, heard of them. Yeah.
Very large company. They probably do about $100 million in volume, and they're in 50 countries. And I went out and I raised in $100,000 minimum increments. I raised money from about 60 people. Some people put in more, some put in less.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a 7-year lease. It's a covered land play where we believe that at some point it's going to go residential condo on the river with a water feature.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. So we're doing those kind of deals. That's not typical because usually we buy one building at a time.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned you've got property now all over the country.
Well, no, actually we have divested of everything except Chicago.
Okay.
We are now down. We've sold 81 buildings. We're down to 19 buildings. It's been a good time to be a seller over the past few years.
Sure.
And it has not been a good time to be a buyer over the past few years because in industrial, the prices have been very inflated. And so I've been sitting on the sidelines. I think we only bought that 3-building package this year, plus one other building this year. Mm-hmm. And then a couple of buildings last year, but it's been slow going on acquisitions because we are extremely cautious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the same thing in the multifamily space. I mean, again, there's such a such an imbalance in the market right now. It's really painful when you want to be doing deals. You just can't. The pricing that somebody wants to sell it is not what you want to pay, and then the interest rates are killing everybody. Oh yeah. So we'll come out of this cycle we're in, but it's pretty painful right now. Who knows what the Fed's going to do? I mean, are they really going to lower rates next year? We'll see.
I doubt it.
The thing is that, all right, so fine. The rates were way too low for way too long, and they should have adjusted before we got into a position where they had no dry powder, or nowhere to go. You can't go below zero unless that doesn't work. So, again, just too low for too long, and now we're reaping the horrible pain of it. So it's a tough space to be in now. Yeah.
It is something that I believe in very strongly, that I heard at a conference recently, is the most important thing that you can put together is your not to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
Not your to-do list, your not to-do list, things you should not do.
Can you elaborate? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. When I was doing my brokerage and I wanted to be an owner and a syndicator, and I couldn't figure out how to get started, what I needed to do was figure out what not to do anymore, because the activities of being a broker took all my time up, and it didn't leave me any time to do what I felt was the right thing to do at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I heard Grant Cardone say this before. He says, you got to give something up to start something new. You can't keep doing what you're doing the way you're doing it without giving something up if you want to grow, if you want to try the next thing.
Yeah.
And I've had I think my biggest mistake is I held on to brokerage for too long. I still do brokerage, by the way, so maybe that should be on my not to-do list. I still do brokerage because I have clients from many years ago that I still work with. And I just completed 2 deals with a company called the Bradford Exchange. They distribute collectibles.
Yep.
They've been my client since I was 24 years old.
Right.
And I just did another deal with another old client, an old friend who's been with me for decades. So part of doing a little brokerage is also keeping current with the market, making sure that I know the values of buildings from the standpoint of talking to other brokers and taking people on tours of buildings to show them the market.
Mm-hmm.
So that's still on my to-do list, but not to-do list is to do a lot less of it.
Right. Yeah. You do the ones you want to do, but you're not going to take on just open season, and you're not going to work with necessarily a new client unless there's a real driver behind it. So yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So Joel, is there something that you do personally or perhaps through your businesses that you can mention that you do to give back to help others in some way?
Yeah, I'm in a mentorship role with right now 7 different people in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear from them almost daily.
Okay.
Some of them, I might go a week without talking to someone or hearing from them, but it's texting and talking and teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the funniest stories was I was mentoring a young man back when I was active in brokerage. And, in industrial real estate and commercial real estate, you do rental by the square foot.
Yeah.
So it's a certain amount per square foot per year in Chicago. There are markets like Boise, Idaho, where it's by the month. So it's $1 a month per square foot, which would be $12 here.
Right.
So there was a young man I was training, and because mentorship is my thing, and I let him run with the deal. It was a very, very small deal with a small client. And I figured if he makes a mistake, nobody dies.
Right.
So he's working with this client and talking to me about it on a daily basis. And the guy was in the manufacturing business. He was manufacturing some kind of small parts that went into, they were components for electronics.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very small business. He had worked for a large company, and he said, I can do this. And he went and started his own business. And he was 5 years or so in, and he had a real business with real revenues. So this fellow, Kerry, represented him as my mentee. I was guiding him all along. They signed a lease, and the guy calls Kerry and he says, I've got a problem here. I'm in this 10,000 square foot space, and the rent is supposed to be $6 a foot per year.
Mm-hmm.
which would be $5,000 a month.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I signed a lease that said per month instead of per year. So the rent was 10 times higher, 12 times higher than what he thought he was paying. So the rent was $720,000 for the year instead of 60,000.
Right.
And Kerry comes to me, he says, what am I going to do? And this could put a person out of business.
Yeah.
And I said, well, as your mentor, I'm going to tell you, I'm sorry that I didn't read the lease. I might have noticed that it said per month instead of per year.
Mm-hmm.
I said, but in legal terms, when you make a mistake like that, and it's clear what the intent was, you could actually win a case if there was litigation saying we didn't mean to do per month.
Right.
So he went back to the landlord, and the landlord said, oh, I didn't see that either. It was like an honest mistake.
Oh.
So they fixed it.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That is a blessing that the other party was willing to work with the situation that was just a mistake. So, you know, I mean, I had a personal house closing where, you know, the closing attorney made a mistake that would have hurt me to the tune of a couple $1,000s. And, you know, they were gracious enough to help recognize and fix the situation. They understood it was just an honest mistake. And, you know, but yeah, you're gonna run into somebody who's gonna play hardball and won't fix it. Which obviously then leads to a legal case. So glad that worked out. And you know, but again, you know, your mentee will never make that mistake again, right?
No, and another mentee walked in the back door. He couldn't get in the front door during COVID. They got rid of the receptionist because they didn't need anybody. There weren't too many people working in the office. There's a big warehouse in the back and a small office in the front. And he walked in the back door, and someone said to him that yelled, "Hey, who are you? I'm going to call the cops." And he like ran out because he was afraid that the police were going to come. But there was one time where a guy actually walked in, and the guy did call the cops while he was talking to him. He said, "I'm going to call the police. You should not be canvassing. This is not legal," which, by the way, it is legal.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy said, "Fine, call the police." And the police came over and actually said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm going door to door. We own a building down the street. We're trying to find a tenant."
Mm-hmm.
The officer said to the person that was canvassed, the owner of the company who called the police, the officer said, "Sir, there's nothing wrong with him coming door to door in a neighborhood to see if you want to move into his building."
Yeah.
And the guy said, "Yeah, well, I felt like calling the police. He was bugging me. He shouldn't have been here." So, you know, these mentorship things are really sometimes a riot.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. Yeah. So, Joel, speaking of advice and mentorship, what advice would you give somebody who's considering making a path change?
I don't know. Oh, I didn't tell you this. My dad was a career counselor
Okay.
for a living.
Mm-hmm.
My dad passed away 2 years ago, but what he did is he helped people figure out what to do for their next career. I think career counseling is a really good idea
Mm-hmm.
because they give you tests, and a well-experienced career counselor can interview you and figure out what your interests are. That's really big.
Yeah.
But I also think it's just having people who are in your orbit who can advise you, and you have to listen to what they say.
Mm-hmm.
So many people I know who've changed careers have done so because they had a passion, and they finally woke up one day and said, "I don't like getting up in the morning for this job. I'm going to make the change."
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who's 62 and he went to law school, and he just graduated three months ago from law school, or
Wow.
from law school. And
Wow.
he's starting out at age 65 as a lawyer.
Is he going to be a 100-hour-a-week associate?
No, he's actually into constitutional law, and he's going to be in
Okay.
academics.
Okay. Sorry, he's going to be a what?
Into academics. He's going to work
Okay.
at a university.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. And again, you know, I love that approach in a way because again, lifelong learner. You're never too old to learn, and you know, just people who are open to learn, even at you know, again, that was 3 years of law school to go at 62 years old to achieve that. So well done for him. And again, I think that's so important to really keep a lifelong learner attitude about you can always learn something. And
Yeah.
you know, and I will also mention, you know, briefly that the type of mentorship you're doing is fantastic. I mean, you know, definitely we've had a lot of people that were very gracious with us as we were getting started to, answering questions, things like that. But it wasn't that that level of relationship that you're building with your mentees. And, in fact, actually go back to your start, the family you talked about, they were very, very gracious in taking you under their wing. And I wish there was more of that, because again, that's how we really develop expertise. So,
Yeah, they were wonderful. Steve Podolsky's still a friend.
mm-hmm.
He's in his 70s. I'm in my 60s, and we invest together. He puts 50 or 75 or $100,000 into each of our deals, and he's on a committee of 8 advisors that I have. I don't do a deal without talking to all 8 of my advisors. I will not buy a property without those people firing their toughest questions at me.
Mm-hmm.
So Steve's still mentoring me.
Nice.
And
That's awesome.
he likes the kid that I taught Joel everything that he knows, but not everything that I know. That's what Steve says. He still says that.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Joel, what's the best way for people to reach out to you to say hello, see what you're up to?
Our website is Brit Properties, BRIT with 1 T, properties.com. It's named after one of our property managers, Brad. It stands for Brad Really Is Terrific.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Very good. Well, Joel, thank you for being on the Road Less Traveled show. We certainly appreciate your time and definitely wish you continued success.
Thank you very much.
And we want to remind all our listeners out there, please remember to give us a 5-star rating so we can bring you more great content like our show today with Joel Friedland. Please also reach out to Bill and myself. We're happy to have a conversation anytime. ParkCapitalPartnersLLC.com, ParkCapitalPartnersLLC.com, and a couple things that Park Capital Partners has going. First, we have the Park Capital Partners Value Add Fund, which is a 506c fund open today to accredited investors. Second, we have the Park Capital Partners Foundation, which is another way that Bill and I give back. And the way that works quickly is first we fund its operations, so all the money donated goes to do its best work, which is to help others. Second, we donate personally. Third, we donate corporately. And finally, when investors invest with us in one of our projects, we make a donation to honor that investor to a pre-selected list of 15 different charities. So please reach out, say hello. We're happy to chat anytime. And remember, folks, the road less traveled may be calling you. We recommend that you listen and take action. Thanks for joining.